Alright, today we're going to be learning how to read from a file in Python. In the last video, we covered the random module, in which we saw that it gave us the ability to generate pseudo-random numbers, and we also saw some of its useful functions that will especially be useful for later in the series, in which I'll be making a Hangman and a Wordle project. So, one thing I want to note is that this file opening videos are going to be separated into two parts. So the first part is learning how to read from a file, which I'll be covering in this video. The second part of this video is going to be learning how to actually write and append to this file. So before actually learning how to read from a file, there's one more thing I want to point out. So I first have a main.py program in which we'll actually be using to interact with the file. And we have this other file we have here is words.txt, which is a words.txt file. Is a file that I created before making this video. And here in this text file, I have a bunch of programming terms. We have programming, Python, Java, recursion, lists, and arrays. And here we have this main.py program. And in this program, we can actually interact with this file. So in this case of the video, I'm going to be reading from this file. So the format to this is with open as file. So the important function we have here is open. This is the important function we have here. And since it's a function, we need to have the name and open and close parentheses. And so what open basically means in simple terms is that we can actually open this file. Now, in order to interact with the file, we first need to actually open it. So I'm going to be explaining each of these keywords. So this with keyword basically means it specifies a code block in which we can interact with the file within this code block. So with open as this file, and since it's a code block and we give a new line, it's going to give us an indent. And here in this, set of lines of code in this indent, I can specify how I want to interact with this file. So I can read from this file, I can write to this file, and I can append to this file. But in the cases of this video, I'm going to be only covering how to read from this file. So with open, now this open function requires one argument for us to pass. So the argument that it requires us to pass is actually the name of the file that we want to open. So with open and in parentheses, and in quotation marks, the name of the file. So since the name of the file here is words.txt, we see here words.txt, this open is going to open this words.txt file. And we have this as file. So this as file basically is an alias, which basically it's kind of like a variable. We have a variable that can store values, and we have those values that can be stored inside these variables. So that's the same idea here. We have this as file, which can be similarly called as a variable that stores this file that we opened here. So we can use this file specifically in the code block to actually interact with the file. So that's what alias is. It gives us a name we can give to opening this file. And in this code block, we can use this alias. So if I want to read all of these lines of the words.txt file, then I would, there are three functions I'm going to be going over. So the first function I'm going to be going over is read. So what read basically does is that it reads all the lines of the text file. So first I'm going to be declaring a variable. So I'm going to say words, set that equal to, I'm going to read from this words.txt file. So I'm going to say words equals files dot read. And here we see files the alias, so we can use it here in the code block. So file dot read, which means in this words.txt file, we're going to be reading each of these lines into this variable right here. So words equals files.read. And since read is a function, we need to make sure that we have read and open and close parentheses. We have .read, which means read all of these contents from the words.txt file. And then store that in a variable called words. So words equals file.read. And now if I print out words, now we're going to see it's going to print out all of the lines that we had here in this words.txt file. It's going to print out programming, Python, Java, recursion, lists, arrays. And it's going to print out same thing here we have here. So programming, Python, Java, recursion, lists, arrays. So now if I add a line and say, for example, conditions and loops, which is another concept of programming. So conditions and loops. Now if I say this and run it, now it's going to print out the same thing, except it's also going to include conditions and loops since I had that in the file. So to summarize, the read function basically reads all the lines of the file, and I'm basically storing that inside of a variable. So the next the next function I'll be going over is readline. So what readline basically means is it's only going to be reading the first line that we have here in the file. So since the first line of this words text file is programming, then this readline is gonna have this programming and store that in the variable called words. And basically we can think of this as readline as basically reading a line, right? It's gonna read the first line of the text file we have here. So it's gonna have this programming, and this readline is gonna have this programming and store it inside this variable. So now if I run this, we see this printing out programming. Now if I change this to, for example, I'm just gonna switch this to coding, and now if I run this, now it's gonna print out coding. So that's basically the readline function, and it's only reading the first line of the file. And now the last function I'll be going over in this video is read lines. So basically read lines, it's kind of like read, except that it's basically reading all the lines of the file, but storing it into lists. So the difference here is that we have this read lines function. So read lines is going to read all of these lines of the text file, but then storing each of these lines as one data item in a list. Now recall what a list is. It's a collection of data items. So it's going to have coding as one data item we have here, Python as another data item, and so on until we reach the last line of this text file. So that's basically what readline is. Read lines is. It's basically like read, except it's storing it inside a list. So we have file, which is the alias we have here, or variable, another way we can say it, and file.readlines, which means read all the contents or lines within this file and store it as a list. So we have words equals file.readlines, which means this is a list. And now if we print it out, we see it's going to print out a list for us. We see here it's going to print out coding as one data item. And here we see we have a \n. Now, recall what a \n is. It is basically a new line character. So it basically essentially means it's a new line of text. We have coding, new line of text, Python, new line of text, Java. So that's why it has this \n here. You have coding, \n, Python, \n, Java, \n, and so on until we reach the end of the file. So those are three of the important functions we covered in this video. And to summarize, read basically reads all the lines of the file. Read line only reads the first line of the file. Read lines reads all the lines of the file, just like read does, except it stores it as a list. So that's the important thing to note here. So if I added, for example, after this conditions and loops, if I had, for example, I'm just going to say, for example, C. And if I run this now, we see it's going to add this C, right, as the last data item, since this is the last line of text. But we see here there's no \n. Since in this line of text, I didn't add a new line. I didn't add a new line of text. But if I added a new line of text, and now we rerun this, we see it's adding the \n. So that's also a thing to keep note of, is that a \n essentially means a new line of text in the file we have here. And so basically those are three important functions we're covering in this video in terms of reading from a file. So in the next video, in the next part, we're going to be learning how to actually write and append to a file.